This is the Craft Equation, where conversations about craft brewing, business, and culture all come together. I'm your host, Cameron, co-founder of Mother Earth Brew Co. Now let's crack one open and get into it. All right, everybody, welcome back. It's the Craft Equation. I'm your host, Cameron. This week, we have a very special guest. We have Chris Baker. He is our Director of Brewing Operations here at Mother Earth Brew Co. Chris is going to be joining us for a very, very interesting conversation about something that you may have heard of recently called PFAS, which we will get into a little bit in a moment. But before I do, I want to make sure that we all do the most important thing, and that's to crack a beer. And Chris, I'm going to be starting with the collaboration IPA with Breakside. And by the way, for those listening or watching, if you haven't had a chance to try this yet, we actually talk about collaborations as a whole, as well as this beer with Breakside Brewing's Ben Edmonds from Portland. You can find that in our episode list on YouTube and Podbean or wherever you get your podcasts. In addition to that, I will make sure that I pour it into this glass because, as we all know, drinking beer out of a glass is very important. The preferred way to drink a beer. If you'd like to know more about that topic, make sure you check out our conversation with Master Cicerone Daniel Imdeck. That is also available in our library, and that was just a couple weeks ago we did that. So anyway, cheers, Chris.
Cheers. I'm not pouring mine into a glass, but
that's okay.
Cheers.
That's all right. All right. Let's get started. Well, let's talk about you a little bit, Chris. So for those listening or watching, Chris is not just our Director of Brewing Ops, but he's uniquely suited to talk about today's conversation, PFAS in beer, because he has a Bachelor of Science in biochemistry with an emphasis in molecular biology. That's a mouthful. Prior to working for us, he worked at Stone Brewing, and then in a former life, he was actually working for Novartis, looking for early detection of Alzheimer's and things of that nature and organic chemistry and whatnot. Chris, did I do it justice? Is that correct?
Yeah, close enough. Yep.
Nice, cool. Yeah. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you do for us, and what we're going to be talking about today?
For sure. So like you said, I'm the Director of Brewing Operations. So most of what I do is focused around cost management, things like that, contracting, raw material, procurement, whatnot. Also, obviously, working in the brewing sciences, working with our yeast, working with our raw materials from our barley to our hops to our water that's coming into the brewery, which is why this is a really interesting topic for me because it's something that the entire world is going to be dealing with here probably pretty heavily in the next like 5 to 10 years. And so it's something that has already touched our brewery and is a conversation topic with our municipality here. And so we have some early results on kind of where we live in that world, but it's something, like I said, that we'll be keeping our eye on going forward. So, yeah.
And can you, I've been struggling to pronounce this correctly. So today, when we're talking about PFAS, that's what is that generally accepted as the acronym, correct? I'm saying that correctly. I would prefer PFAS because PFAS is just really awkward, but it is what it is.
But yeah, per or polyfluoral alkyl substances is kind of the compound group that we're talking about. I mean, it exists. There's 15,000 different compounds that are a part of this, so it's pretty wide reaching and is pretty common in the world, honestly.
Okay, and from what I can understand, what I've read about it, these are essentially quote unquote forever chemicals that are found in many consumer and industrial products. These are man-made chemicals, and they do not break down in the environment, correct? So they persist for a long period of time.
So yeah, so the idea behind the compound itself is that carbon and fluorine like bonds are some of the strongest bonds in the chemical world, so they do not break down, and they're in things that make sense. They're, the nonstick coating on pans. They're in our waterproof clothing like Gore-Tex and stuff like that. They use them for stain resistance and carpets and stuff like that. The idea is that the compounds, protect the things that we use and protect us and the environment and stuff like that. They also show up in wildfire treatments and things like that. They are very effective at what they do. However, to your point, they're also very stable and they do not break down very fast.
Okay. So we're not just talking about these things being present in, because we're talking about this on the show because obviously as a beer show the concern is that these PFAS are found in the finished product in beer. Now just for everyone listening, for clarity, that's not something that occurs in the brewery. That's something that exists in groundwater, which we use, filter, and then it shows up a lot of times in the finished product.
Correct. It's not a part of any of the brewing ingredients or any. I mean, we don't use chemicals per se very much in the brewery in general, other than cleaning tanks, and they're pretty innocuous anyway. It's something that exists in our water and can potentially show up in our final product, depending on where you're brewing in the country.
Okay, so can you talk a little bit? That's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. So when we're talking about depending on where you're at in the country, are you saying then that the presence of PFAS and the concentrations it's found in are specific to certain municipal, or not specific, but are they vary, the concentrations vary based on municipality. Is that correct?
Correct. And a lot of it has to do with industrial processes. So there are certain industrial processes out there in manufacturing that is done where the concentrations are quite a bit higher. I know that in the studies that I was reading up to this talk, North Carolina, Michigan, and California were some of the ones that had some of the higher concentrations just due to the amount of industrial work being done in those areas. So it does matter. They've found it. I think the number I thought was like 75 or 80% of municipalities around the country have shown detectable levels of PFAS. It's not to say it doesn't exist everywhere, but the concentrations vary based on what's going on in the industrial world around those areas.
So how are these chemicals getting into the water? Are they leaching in from the soil at dump sites, or are these chemicals that are being added when they're adding things like, chlorine and fluoride and stuff like that? Is this happening at a processing plant, or is it a byproduct of the environment that the water is
A
being
lot
stored
of
in?
the time, Yeah, so a lot of the time it's coming from like landfills and these processing facilities because it's kind of a new thing that we've detected. A lot of the manufacturing processes weren't looking to remove this product and like their waste streams and stuff like that. So this is all slow, like now starting to come around. The EPA has actually outlawed several of these compounds to reduce the levels, and so manufacturing is changing to adapt to what we're learning. But the reality is that these products and even the basic stuff I was talking about, whether they're old nonstick pans or they're Gore-Tex jackets that get to the landfills, the jackets or the materials break down, but not this particular compound, which then leaches its way into the soil and can eventually find itself into groundwater and things like that, which then municipalities pull from. They may pull from either a pond or something, but most of the water travels overland or underground before it is treated by our municipalities, where they're chlorinated to make sure that they're safe for drinking, and they end up leaching into our water supply. And that's like the number one way that they're kind of showing up in consumers' hands at your taps at your house or in products like beer.
So this is I guess I didn't realize when we first started talking about this. This is literally a contamination issue.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not even, just the United States. It's the entire world. This is something that these are products or compounds that have been used since the 1940s, 1950s in manufacturing that we're just now beginning to realize are not going away and are starting to show up in humans for the most part. I mean, they're fine. I think it was some crazy number, like 95% of people, like it can be detected in their bloodstream.
Wow. So it's almost like the
So it's
microplastics
almost like the
issue.
microplastics
Yeah,
issue.
to a degree, exactly. It's just the overuse of certain compounds and the fact that they don't go away, so they start showing up in things that we don't expect. I mean, they're going to show up in the animals, and some of the food in the food supply, the food chain. They're going to show up in our water. They're going to show up all over the place, and yes, eventually end up in humans.
Okay. And from a scientific standpoint, what makes PFAS so persistent compared to other contaminants? Like, why is this more concerning than anything else? Is it hyperbole? Is it just recent news?
I mean, it's a reasonable concern because in humans it has been shown to have negative impacts on the human body. It can be like your body can interpret some of them as a hormone. It has been shown to have effects on especially young kids as far as their like pubescent development and stuff like that. It can have a lot of developments. It can have effect on your kidneys. It can have effects on your liver. It's something that is definitely of concern. Early trials are showing that it is something that we need to be concerned about. Now, when we talk about the detection limits and where we're at a level where our technology to detect the chemical has improved substantially. So we are currently, as a country, in the process of developing the standards that need to be met to make sure that water is safe and all that kind of stuff is there. So our first part of doing that is developing tests that are reliable and accurate, and then the second part is determining what levels are acceptable and what are not acceptable. And that's currently the process that they're at right now. The levels are detectable, but in most cases still very, very low. Like if we talk about, again, we get into the wastewater testing that we've done at our facility. The city of Nampa came in, didn't charge anybody. They're looking for in general to see where the sources are. They came in and checked our wastewater stream and realized that we were non-detect on the entire umbrella of PFAS compounds, at least what the EPA is accepting at this point. And so that's a good thing. So it's not to say that it's necessarily like stop drinking water. The world's coming to an end right now. It's more that it's just something that has been noticed, has shown in clinical trials that can be bad or detrimental to humans, and is something that the world is working on kind of cleaning up.
When we were talking earlier, you were referencing things like proximity to the water source, even regionality. As we've seen on some of the diagrams that were provided by the ACS Pub article, they're showing different parts of the country. Even though this is a worldwide problem, but when we're just talking about the United States, what is it about PFAS and how it's making its way into? What is it about it that makes locale relevant?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for most situations, like the reality is that it really depends on how close you are to your water source. So, I mean, if you, like, for instance, we've got our water sources, our ground runoff, snowpack, snow melt turns into water in lakes and turns into streams and eventually turns into groundwater. And it's where a lot of the wells that cities, municipalities pull from provide for us. I think your proximity to that snow melt or to that rainfall or whatever the case may be probably lends to a lower overall concentration in the water you see on tap, or what we would use to pull into the brewery to brew with. Whereas if you live in times where you have a lot of runoff or a ton of groundwater, in the case, let's look at, I think the highest detection limits that I saw, or detection amounts that I saw, were in North Carolina, Michigan, and California. Those states all have high amounts of industrial processing in general that may contribute to it, but also they tend to be a little bit farther downstream from their water source. That water has run a long way to get to where people are using it. So I think that's where, if you're kind of at the end of that stream, you potentially see higher levels than if you're relatively close to your water source. And again, it also goes back to this industrial processing. You got to kind of look around and see what's around you. Like, we know we have a good amount of microchip manufacturing in Boise with Micron close by. Now, I don't know enough about their process to know if they're contributing to PFAS or not, but I know they have a pretty aggressive wastewater treatment situation, and that they're it's a fairly new company. It's not manufacturing that's been done for the last 50 to 100 years or whatever the case may be. So I think your locale really does play into the concentrations that you're going to see. And in our results, in our wastewater detection, we were non-detect on the main umbrella of compounds kind of deemed to be PFAS or PFAS. And so I think this is just luck. I think the reality of that is just kind of where we're poised and how our water table works in the area that we're in. In the report that you're looking at, it's basically showing one column on the left is showing all of the compounds that were being tested for. The column next to it shows ND or non-detect for everything there. And then on the right, you're seeing a bunch of calibration standards where they're using their instrumentation, proving that it's reading the way that it's supposed to be and what the detection levels of that piece of equipment are.
You said you used the word luck. Now, what about things that we can control? So we're talking about filtration primarily, right? What are some of the methods of filtration that breweries are using to, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, remove contaminants like PFAS from the finished product?
Yeah, well, and I mean, so pretty much every commercial brewery or fairly large brewery that I know of is going to use some kind of activated carbon filtration, mostly to remove chlorine. Chlorine contributes a bunch of chlorophenol or bad compounds that taste kind of medicinal or band-aidy to our product if we brew with them. So most breweries, that it just has to happen. There are a few situations out there where people have very low levels of chlorine based on where they're located, and they don't have to worry about it as much. But 99% of breweries are going to run that. That removes a small amount of it. In all reality, anything that, a small amount of those compounds, that umbrella of PFAS compounds, can be removed. Now, if you go to something like an RO system, I know that there's a very high efficacy rate on that side, but like most brewers don't RO filter all of their water. They usually RO a portion of it, just because there's a decently high rejection rate when it comes to doing that. So like when you RO filter water, your filtered stream goes one way, but there is a brine stream that is rejected by the filter that goes out and goes down the drain. So one, you're using more water to brew with, and two, it's not as cost effective. There's also some ion exchange and some other filtration methods that will also produce lower PFA concentrations in their water stream. And so I think historically brewers are using it more for brewing practices, but then it is true that, breweries that are more RO focused will actually remove some of it. But, knocking out 50% is a good thing. So if we know that like PFAs are at a low level in general, and you figure they're filtering 50% of their water or even 30%, that means that those PFA levels are probably dropping, about the same amount. So it's possible. It's something that you can definitely talk to a brewer and ask them about and see if they do anything with their water. Ask about it if you're wondering if they do RO filter their water. But it's not, we definitely don't all do that. We all carbon filter because you have to remove chlorine. We don't necessarily all RO filter or ion exchange filter.
So I'm actually really interested to see what the future is going to look like for breweries then. I mean, what is reasonable for all of us, meaning us as consumers, as brewers, as citizens? What's reasonable for us to expect from our breweries? I mean, where does the responsibility lie in terms of providing a safe, product to drink? I mean, a lot of this stuff sounds great, but it also sounds very expensive. And this is something that we should already, in my mind, we should already be demanding this from our own municipalities. Like, if this lands in our lap, that it seems like that's somewhat misplaced.
Agreed.
In my mind.
Agreed.
And how, if you could also expand on that and just let me know where you think that the future of all this is going to go for brewers, right? Like historically, we've been altering our water profile in order to deliver the best finished product in terms of appearance, flavor, aroma, etc. Do you think this PFAS stuff is going to affect the way that brewers ultimately approach, their whole setup? I
mean, I think it's definitely something that people could take into account. It is like going, like for us as the brewery that we are, like going like full RO to try to knock out every last little bit of PFAs that we can, would incur a lot of cost and a lot of investment to get to that level. I think that people in general, we need to actually trust our EPA and our municipalities to some degree. Because I know right now, just from our perspective, that our municipality is currently in testing and that the EPA is currently testing around the country to see what kind of requirements they are going to put on cities to make sure that they're cleaning this up. Again, it's been kind of identified recently as a problem. And there is the country is actively working to try to remove this. It's a new problem. But I mean, yes, brewers could, kind of take it onto their own dime and go after it. I think that that's reasonable. That, you may be seeing labels in the future that say PFA, free. And that's something that we may actually see going into the future. It does require investment, and not everybody's going to be able to do it. And in some cases, like us, like if we go through and start testing our water and it's really realistically not there, then Is that something we need to put on our label? Is that something that we need to invest money in just to be extra sure that it's not something that shows up? I think the reality is the onus is going to fall on the municipalities and the EPA as they set those regulations. But instead, they can set regulations all day long and say, okay, municipality in, Boise, Idaho, you can't have this. But the reality is they also have to provide guidance into how to remove it. You know what I mean? Because if we're dealing with, let's say we're dealing with 20,000 gallons of water a day, the city's dealing with millions of gallons of water a day. So whatever they end up doing is going to be much more expensive, much more energy intensive, and everything else. So it's something brewers can get into.
But at the same time, we're paying them to do that.
Yeah, to a degree, yes.
Right?
Your taxes and I mean, we have the Clean Water Act specifically states that that's something that they need to be doing. We have established in our country that is something we are going to go after, that places are going to have clean water. I mean, there's been examples of municipalities getting beat by it in the past by other compounds like lead, and certain areas of the world or the country have had issues in the past. The onus should be on them, and that's something that the country should be working on. But as we go, as technology continues to advance, we're going to have to deal with new challenges on a regular basis. So PFAS is just scratching the surface of what these municipalities and everybody are going to have to remove from water, or try to mitigate, and so they're going to have to react quickly. So to your point, it does become possible. As a brewery, can we put an RO system in and potentially remove it? Of course we can. And maybe that's a better way to look at it, but that's not to say that the next PFA thing is going to be removed by RO. So at what point are we just going full blown, like all the water in our brewery is filtered to the nth degree, and what's that's going to cost? This, I know this, for our business, it's not a super high margin business. There's not a ton of dollars all the time to spend on stuff like that. It's just something that we can be aware of. We can do some of it, but we really do need to rely on our municipalities to kind of knock this out. At least come up with something even to present to the populace is here's a good solution to make sure you're good. If you're worried about it, go buy an RO system, under-counter RO system for your house, install it and drink that. That'll definitely help remove, that quantity personally.
Cut down.
And for brewers, it's the same kind of thing. If we think we need to go there, then we can. And I would admit that I would agree with you that if I lived in a place where the detection levels were high enough that would be an immediate potential concern for me, and something that I would want to do to make sure that my product is safe. If I knew there's something in it that's not going to be great for people, I want to get it out. Whereas we're lucky enough in our current place that we don't have that. You know what I mean? We have done some testing and we're clear. So it's going to depend a little bit, but I don't know. I agree with you that it would be nice to see brewers go out of the way to completely remove it, but it does put a lot of weight on them. There are a lot of other products that we buy that are pulled from municipal water sources that potentially have it as well. Most people should be drinking a decent amount more water than they are beer, to some degree. So hopefully, those products are also, being covered. So it's a fairly large issue. And again, it's a little much for me to put it out completely on the brewers to remove it all.
It is. I agree totally. And unfortunately, the reason that we're having to talk about this is that it came up because of this article that came out, which the BA subsequently, sort of acknowledged. And I feel like they should have done a little bit more to provide some context. It was more, almost like a press release that they put out that was sort of acknowledging the existence of these things, but not really doing anything to further educate people, which I thought was a little bit misguided. But it is what it is. They also don't want to take a position, which I get, because we don't probably know as much as we'd like to. Exactly. About the scope and severity of this issue. I also wanted to just pull up so this is the EPA.gov website, and for anyone listening that wants to further educate yourself, I highly recommend going there and checking that out. You can just Google, PFAS EPA. It'll come out. They go over the EPA's current understanding of the problem, what they're doing to assess risk and mitigate the problems. It's really good stuff. But anyway, just to put things in perspective, because we're talking about, and you just alluded to, the problem kind of being dumped in breweries' laps right now, which is a bummer for us. But just so everyone knows how widespread this problem is. First of all, the test that was performed was only done in the Cape Fear region of North Carolina. So there were 23 beers that were selected, and they were all bought from grocery stores, multiple cans. And all this information is available on that ACS article. And they did intentionally pull samples from a region that is known to have exceedingly high levels of PFAS. So the data that came back was like, oh, we found it in 95% of the samples. Well, there were only 23 beers, multiple samples. And so here's some of this is the short list from the EPA website of other possibly known contaminated products or places. Landfills, disposal sites, hazardous waste sites, and no surprise there, right? Fire extinguishing foam. These are film forming foams that are used to extinguish fires in emergency response situations like airports, shipyards, military bases, training facilities, chemical plants, and refineries. Chrome plating, electronics, textile industry, paper manufacturers, food. It's been found in high concentrations in fish, even dairy products from livestock that have been exposed to PFAS, food packaging, fast food wrappers, microwave popcorn bags, pizza boxes, candy wrappers, household products, stain and water repellent, used on carpets, upholstery, clothing, and other fabrics. Cleaning products, nonstick cookware, paints, varnishes, sealants, personal care products like shampoo, dental floss, and cosmetics. And then they go on to say that people can be exposed by drinking water, eating, swallowing contaminated soil, or breathing air.
Yeah.
So, I mean, again, I'm not trying to be anti-alarmist by any stretch, but that's a pretty extensive list. It's kind of like reminds me during COVID, where you'd see folks like driving down the road in their car with the windows up wearing a mask. And you're like, you're probably safe in there. Yeah.
Totally.
But to each their own, no judgment here, but it feels a little bit like that, where the lack of information out there is leading to some or has led to some like irrational behavior.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, we've already seen some, like, they've outlawed some manufacturing processes that involve these chemicals as they learn more, and I think we're probably going to see more of that going forward. The hard part is a lot of things you're talking about, those compounds add stability, add shelf life, add durability, if I go snowboarding and
they're important in our daily lives.
And that's exactly why they've been used for so long, is it's like, oh, I want my jacket to be waterproof, but I also want it to last for, 5, 6, 10 years. And so then by that, they add these chemicals because, again, that fluorine carbon bond is so strong and so stable that they last forever. But side effect is, they also stay in our environment forever. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Sure.
And I mean, I agree with you. I think breweries are probably on the lower end of that of that concern, in the sense that some of what we do, and even a basic filtration like we talked about with carbon filtering, removes some of it, and nothing that we do in the brewery is adding to that. And so I think that that's kind of the important aspect of this, is that, like, it's not coming from the breweries. It's no more unsafe to drink beer than it is to, do a lot of, to use a lot of products that you kind of discussed. And so I think that's kind of the important takeaway. I always want our industry to be proactive, and I'd love to be able to, help us all understand and attack this. But at the same time, some product problems aren't going to necessarily be, like, the brewing industry is not the easiest one to take care of it.
Let's use an example of something even more innocuous than that. So I'm going out onto my patio last night, and I'm looking at this wicker table and chairs set that has been out there in direct UV exposure for the 8 years that we've lived in this home. And I'm going, how is that thing still standing? Probably because it's loaded full of corrosion resistant PFAS.
Yeah. Very, very, very possible.
But what am I going to do? Go throw that thing out on the curb? Like, what?
And that's the hard part.
And I'm opening my cabinet to grab a snack, and it's like the walls are coming in on me. It was because it was, we had a conversation prior to recording the show about it. And it's like now I'm seeing everything through the PFAS and microplastics filter, and I'm generally not one of those people that is I don't tend to worry about this type of stuff, but I think it would be easy if you are someone who has the propensity to fret about things like this. It would be easy to let your mind run away with itself.
Absolutely.
Right?
And it's true. And new products and new things are being invented all the time. And this is the cyclical nature of manufacturing and things we want. There's things the consumer want. So then the industry tries to design that. They invent something new. And then later we find out that new thing actually negatively impacts our environment and us as people. And then we go in this big circle. So again, like I said, like we're going to need to rely on all of our, engineering and the EPA and the government entities that run all this to hopefully identify these things quickly and help adjust the starting line, the manufacturing that's generating it, and get rid of that so that we don't live in this like circle all the time. I mean, sustainable. If you think about it, like these compounds have been used since like the 40s and the 50s. Like sustainability didn't even become a conversation until the like late 90s, early 2000s. So the reality is like it took the world 40, 50 years to figure out that like, hey, we probably shouldn't just like keep pumping plastic straws into the ocean because they never go away. And that I think it's kind of scary, but at the same time, the world's becoming a little smarter. We're getting a little more technologically advanced. Our detection skills are better. People are looking at a lot of this. There's a ton of government grants going to universities to help test how to get rid of it, test how to, or figure out better ways to detect it. This is the nature of living in the modern world. It's a planet full of people with a lot of new technology. Like
modern conveniences.
We're going to learn about this stuff as we go. And so, like you said, I think the important part is that yes, it's there. It's good that it's been identified. It's good that the conversations are happening. Now let's hope that going forward, we can mitigate it to some degree, and it's not something we have to worry about, in the next 30 to 40 years. I mean, hopefully it's eliminated earlier than that, so our generation, the younger generations, don't have to worry about this as they get older. But then trust me, it's not going to be the last thing that comes up that's like this.
100%.
How much Red Dye 40 did we all drink? Well, before figuring out that was probably bad.
Cancel Red Dye. Cancel straws.
Exactly.
Get your pitchfork and meet in the center of the square.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's a perfect way to cap our conversation today. I really appreciate you joining me to shed light on this topic. I think it's really important, but I think it's also easy to overreact in the absence of facts. And I think the takeaway here, at least for me, is that this is not a brewery specific problem. I'm really glad we sat down to talk about it, because I think that's certainly how I discovered it, was through like the lens of craft beer. And it's obviously a much larger issue that we will continue to keep an eye on. I want to do what I typically do at the end of these episodes. I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about what you have going on. What can we expect out of our brewery in the next couple months? I know we have Wet Hop coming up, right?
No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's in September in the brewery. It's all about hops. Yeah, Fresh as It Gets is getting ready to come out, and we're using Simcoe this year. Beer's tasting great. We've got some Dulcita, or was known as 1019 fresh hop, that's coming out. We actually just packaged a Kolsch that's awesome. We have a bunch of cool stuff. We're going to do a small collab with some hop farmers, at a collab with Stormbreak out of Steamboat Springs in Colorado. Coming up, they're coming out here to check out Hop Harvest and see kind of the tail end of it. So we're going to do a mosaic fresh hop with them, which will be super fun. I mean, we have the Hellas that just came out. We got a Kolsch that just dropped. Honestly, our R&D system is going absolutely.
So these are all small batch beers.
Everything but the Fresh as It Gets batch, but yes.
Well, I definitely want to have you back out at some point, maybe even with an additional guest from Hop Country, so that we can. I think we could have a whole show just on fresh hops.
Absolutely.
That sounds awesome. I think a lot of people would love to know more about what that really means. I've been through a harvest and stuff, so I get it. But aside from just the adoration people have from what they get in the can, I think it's a really, really fascinating process. So we will definitely put that on the calendar. Thanks a lot to Chris Baker for joining us. Thanks to everybody who's watching and listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. And if you like any of the gear you see here, you can grab it on the website, motherearthbrewco.com. Click on that store tab, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot, Chris. Like what you see? There's more where that came from. Check out our other content or find us wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to drop a comment and let us know what topics you'd like to see covered on The Craft Equation.